Good happy Wednesday morning to everybody. This is Victoria Beal with the LTAP Center, and we are so pleased to be able to bring to you this morning the first of a four-part webinar series on the safety program. It's Ohio Safety Project Processes and Funding. This is a four-part series because in person, had we not been social distancing, it would have been a day-long course. So please make sure that you use the same link that you used for this webinar to log in to access this webinar, the next three sessions that should be on your schedule. A couple of quick housekeeping items, and then I'll turn over to your presenters for the day. First off, we have in the handout section of the webinar panel the slides for today as a download for you. We'll also be sending a follow-up email out with those slides attached. So if you, for whatever reason, can't download those out of the handout section, please feel free to just hang on and we'll get an email out to you. And then the other thing I want to mention is that we have a questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. And this is how we're going to be accepting questions throughout the webinar. We want to make sure to cut down on background noise. So if you wouldn't mind finding that questions box and putting a hi or hello or good morning there for me, I would appreciate it. We did have one early bird that put it in there before the webinar even started, and I appreciate that. Thank you everyone for doing that. And that's the same spot you'll go to ask us questions. And those questions will be read off to the presenters as they stop periodically and ask me for them. So if we don't get through all the questions, I will be providing a download of the questions to them afterwards so they can put together responses that we'll send out. Other than that, I believe that's all of the housekeeping items I have for right now. So our presenters for the day are going to be Ray Brushart with the Ohio LTAP Center and Jeremy Thompson, who's a highway safety engineer, and he's with the ODOT Office of Program Management. And I did fail to mention on Ray's title that he is our safety circuit rider. So with that, Ray, are you ready to roll?
I believe I am.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, everybody. As she was saying, my name is Ray Brushart. I'm with the Ohio LTAP Center. And LTAP, in case you don't know, stands for Local Technical Assistance Program. And so our mission is to provide training and technical assistance to all local governments in Ohio. You'll probably hear the word local quite a bit today, so keep in mind that that means local government agency, like, you know, maybe you're with a county engineer's office or a city or a village or a township. And you're going to hear from Jeremy Thompson today, and he and I are both in ODOT's planning division. Our sections are, and you know, I'm in the Office of Local Programs, and he is in the Office of Program Management. And with the section of the Highway Safety Program is his section within that office. And you know, during this pandemic, you know, we realized that it's a good time for people to get a lot of training in. And so here at LTAP, we've been going full blast with providing trainings as far as webinars and e-learning and things like that. And so we're kind of running out of webinars for me anyway. So, you know, Victoria and I put our heads together. It's like, well, what can we offer for more training? And so what I said was, you know, as I've been talking to people all over the state, I realized that there's a lot of people that work at the local level, and sometimes they have some high crash locations within their jurisdiction, and they may or may not know how to get the ball rolling, so to speak, as far as how to get a safety improvement project together. And so we thought that we would just create this four-part webinar series to go over that process, how to get the ball rolling, get a, you know, to make our local roads safer, whether it be a section of roadway or an intersection. And so that's the whole basis of our webinar series. And so today we're doing part 1, which is a general overview of ODOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program and the safety project process. And we'll talk about the different types of projects that we fund, whether it be a traditional spot improvement that might cost up to, who knows, up to $10 million we're allowed to put into these spot improvement projects. And then we also have our systemic improvements where we can do some low cost safety improvements throughout an entire corridor. Things like providing additional signage or pavement markings, friction improvements in the curves, guardrail, things like that. And so we get a lot of bang for our buck and reduce crashes throughout an entire corridor. That didn't necessarily need to have like big improvements like roadway widening or a big project where we straighten out a curve or something. So we'll go, as we go through each part of the webinar series, we talk about these things. So part 2, we're really talking about the traditional safety projects, the spot improvement projects, and we even have a couple of current projects in Ohio that we go through that, how those projects began and go through the entire process until construction. And in part 3 is where we get into the systemic safety projects. We've got a couple examples there as well. And in part 4 is where we'll get into the pedestrian safety improvement program. And so that'll be our 4-part series. And so here are today's learning objectives. So by the end of today's session, we think you'll be able to explain the purpose of ODOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program. You'll understand the type of projects that are eligible to apply for and receive funding from the Highway Safety Improvement Program. We'll also be talking about the 3 primary factors in the project selection process. And we think that you'll appreciate the state-of-the-art research and methodologies that are a part of our project selection process and how engineering judgment also factors into the process. And you'll also be able to explain the purpose of ODOT's Local Safety Assistance Program and also express at least 3 ways how ODOT's Local Safety Assistance Program can assist your particular local agency. So we think these are very important learning objectives. So let's start today. Let's get some interaction going here. I'd like to know who is in attendance today. So can you, Victoria's going to take over to a polling question, and you can select the answer that best shows
And
who you're working for.
they're voting fast and furious here, Ray.
All right, fast and furious. That's how we
We're
like
going to
our
be up over
audience.
80% before you know it. This group is on it. I've never seen an audience respond this quickly before on a webinar. So good job, guys. All right, we're actually up over 90% already. So I'm going to close that
Man,
poll out. And
everybody's had their coffee today.
I guess so. All right, so response-wise, we have 16% from city government, 9% from county government, 1% from township government, we have 13% from state or federal, and then we have 61% from other. So I'm going to hide that, and it is all yours again.
Oh, wow, 61% from other. Does that mean it could be consultants, right? Or it could just be interested, caring people that live in Ohio, maybe. Okay, so this is where I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Thompson, our highway safety engineer from the Highway Safety Program, and he's going to go through the HSIP program requirements and get into some other processes for you. So are you ready, Jeremy?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Ray.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Slight intro. I've only been with the Highway Safety Program for a few months now, kind of at the start of this whole lockdown. But before that, I was in our Office of Traffic Operations for a few years, dealing with signal timing, ramp meters, design operations, all that. And now I'm here to manage our local safety assistance program and deal with a lot of our active transportation initiatives. So to start off, next few slides, I just want to illustrate some of the basic requirements that the Highway Safety Improvement Program has. The purpose of the program, it's federally required, and the goal is to reduce traffic deaths and serious injuries on all public roads. Oops, sorry. Like you'll see, so towards zero deaths is a common phrase that we use in our program, and it's one of the goals. And that's this right here, just reducing traffic deaths and serious injuries. You'll see some of our larger cities start their Vision Zero programs, and it's all the same purpose. Our goal with projects we fund is to reduce severe crashes that cause serious injuries and fatalities. While we'd love to reduce all crashes, our primary goal is to reduce the most severe. Funding wise, we're annually funded at around $158 million, at least this past year. That's what we were at, which is our largest total yet. We're the third largest safety program in the country. And typically on our projects, we have to require a 10% match from our local agencies that we partner with. Thankfully, this year, due to toll revenue credit, we've been able to offer 100% funding. While that process is being reviewed due to a difference in revenue streams with the COVID outbreak and different gas tax revenue, we hope that we'll be able to continue this 100% matching, if not through the rest of this year, starting it back again next year. To be eligible for our program, a project has to fall on any public roadway with a minimum of 10 crashes over a 3-year period, which that requirement can be waived depending on the severity of the crashes. We'll flag locations that have a couple of fatalities over a 3-year period, and that 10 minimum of 10 number will not be necessary. Any activity that is consistent with our SHSP, which stands for the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and corrects or improves that emphasis area, will also be eligible. And you'll see on the right there, that's a list of all of our emphasis areas from the past 5 years in our Strategic Highway Safety Plan. An updated version of that is due by the end of this year, and we are adding work zone crashes to that list. Ineligible activities for application purposes or education and enforcement, while those are ineligible to apply for funding for those, we do offer funding for that in correlation with projects. So for example, right now we're doing a pedestrian improvement project on the east side of Columbus, where along with that, we're having a consultant develop educational materials so we can teach the local community and hopefully distribute materials throughout the whole state on the correct way to use a pedestrian hybrid beacon. It's just one minor example, but we tack on education and enforcement to a lot of our projects. Our application cycle happens twice a year for larger projects. Applications are due every April 30th and September 30th, and application review happens the following month, so every May and October. We have a separate process for lower cost applications. We call them the abbreviated applications, and they're accepted all year round. And those applications typically are for projects that are $500,000 or less and are typically only for construction funding. The applications that we do receive are reviewed by a multidisciplinary committee made up of multiple offices out of central office and some of our district safety team members. That committee, like I said, multiple offices out of central office, such as the Highway Safety Program, which I'm a part of, our Office of Roadway Engineering, Traffic Operations, local programs, and we'll have a few members from various districts review projects that come in from outside of their own district. So usually we have a team of at least 15 or 20 people reviewing all the projects that come through. We'll move on to our next polling question. So is a location with 10 or more crashes in a 3-year period eligible for Highway Safety Program funding?
The question is up and they're voting quickly on this one too. This is a very interested group of participants. So also I wanted to mention that our MPOs commented that they definitely were included in that other group since they weren't listed specifically on the audience earlier. So MPOs, our TPOs are well represented here on the webinar as well as participants. All right, we are up over 90% already, so I'm going to close the poll out and share the results. We have 96% that chose true and 4% that chose false. So I will hide those results and it's all yours again, Jeremy.
All right, thanks, Victoria. Well, that is true with the slight caveats as mentioned. Severity can definitely change that number, but this is an automatic way that a location is eligible for funding. So next, I just want to move on to kind of the types of projects that we do fund. A spot safety project or systemic safety projects. A spot safety project can be funded up to $10 million, but they are typically $5 million or less. They can be something more complex like an interchange upgrade, road widenings, upgrading an intersection. We've done a few more innovative interchanges and intersections like CFIs or continuous flow intersections or DDIs, diverging diamond interchanges, consolidating drives, access management. They can be rural in nature and deal with curves or changing grading or intersection realignments, and they can be as simple as adding signs or upgrading or building new signals. Applications for these types of projects do require a safety study upfront, which would have identified the appropriate countermeasures based on crash trends and various risk factors at that location. Systemic treatment examples include centerline rumble strips, curve signage, detection upgrades, and our pedestrian safety improvement program. In the past few years, we've gone through and analyzed most of the curves in the state and have added the appropriate chevrons or cautionary speed limits to those curves. Our detection upgrade project a few years back put advanced detection on all of our freight corridors around the state, so we could properly time those signals and add passage time when trucks were approaching intersections so that they weren't blowing through red lights. Studies have shown that treatments that are systemic in nature can significantly reduce crashes for less cost. We're able to cut back a little on mobilization and maintenance of traffic costs because we're bundling all these countermeasures into one project. Over the next few slides, I'll go over the project selection process and what the committee looks at when we're deciding on projects. There are 3 primary factors when we're considering projects for funding. The first one is a safety study or analysis upfront that is presenting the countermeasures applied for as the appropriate countermeasures. A project scoring system, which I will go through in a bit. There's a score out of 100 that we give every project, and it's based off a variety of criteria, primarily out of the Highway Safety Manual. An engineering judgment. We're well aware that our scoring system isn't perfect. A safety study performed by a single person isn't always perfect, so we're able to make judgment calls sometimes. For example, our scoring system doesn't yet reflect pedestrian and bicycle projects all that well. They typically don't have a high score. They typically aren't seen to have a high benefit to cost ratio, but we know that they do well and they perform well when they're built. So those projects are usually more judgment calls than scoring calls. So the level of analysis that we will do beforehand, or that needs to be done beforehand, depends on project cost heavily. Like I said, for standard applications, a safety study is a necessary step to take before applying for funding. The study will analyze alternatives based off best current safety practices. For our abbreviated applications, a safety study is not required, but we do want to see some data that shows crash history, some sort of problem statement or eyewitness account of that intersection or segment that is to be upgraded, and some sort of estimate of project cost. It doesn't necessarily need to be construction level estimate, but some sort of preliminary engineering estimate is necessary for our abbreviated application. Both types of applications need to be sent through a community's respective ODOT district. The district safety review team is made up of at least a few members in each district, and they're the ones that have access to our forms that need to be filled out to apply for this funding. So they're kind of like a preliminary review team before it gets sent to the larger committee. Yeah, like at minimum, we need just crash diagrams and trends for these projects. So our scoring process, as I mentioned before, uses the Highway Safety Manual and the state-of-the-art research and methodologies that lie in it. So we are able to quantify safety effects of projects before they're built, or at least kind of guesstimate the safety effects, and we're able to focus our investments on locations with long-term potential for improvement and not just temporary crash spikes. So our first scoring category is expected crash frequency when we're looking at these projects. Expected crash frequency kind of takes all of the attributes of a intersection segment and compares the crash numbers at that location to other locations with similar or the same attributes around the state. So we know how many crashes to expect at a, like for example, 4-lane divided highway that has a rural road intersecting it. We know how many crashes we could expect there by just comparing the data at all the locations around the state. So if the crash frequency is higher than we would expect there, this category will be scored higher because it's not acting like it normally should. The next category is our ratio of observed fatal and serious injury crashes to observed total crashes. As I mentioned before, this a large goal of our safety program is to get that number of fatal and serious injury crashes to 0 in the state. So that's where the score comes into play. The next scoring metric is a percentage for potential safety improvement to total expected crashes. So in the Highway Safety Manual, we are able to quantify certain countermeasures and how much of a safety improvement they bring to an area. So that's where the scoring comes into play, and it takes up a large chunk of the scoring because that's of utmost importance to us. Next is the relative severity index, which kind of quantifies how severe crashes happen over time at a location, which once again, a main goal is to reduce those severe crashes. And it just helps identify the risk that currently exists and how much of that we're mitigating with the proposed countermeasure. Our equivalent property damage only index. So that's another way to just measure severity of crashes for us, comparing our severe crashes to our PDO crashes, and if we have a higher ratio of severe crashes to PDO crashes, this will score high. So up until this point, we've hit 55 of the 100 points by simply looking at crashes and their severity. So I'll move on to the non-crash oriented, but still very important measures that we use to score. So our volume to capacity ratio, it's more of a measure of congestion in an area. We know that congestion and just level of exposure is a criteria that leads to more crashes. That I think this might be one of the categories that gets reviewed more, because if an area is congested enough, the crash severity usually goes down, because we're seeing VERA and PDO crashes most of the time. So this might be one that gets reviewed, but it's still a good measure as it exists to score this. Our benefit to cost ratio is our highest score category. One of the largest or one of the most important things we have to do when we accept these projects is be able to justify them. Like I said before, a large portion of our funding does come from the federal government as well. And so we continuously have to justify our funding and what we're using it for. So having a benefit to cost ratio above 1 tells us that we are getting more benefit out of a project than we are paying for it. So the higher benefit costs, the more scoring it gets. But a caveat to that, active transportation projects have historically scored low. Roundabouts have historically scored low for benefit to cost. So there are upgrades that do need to be made to how we're analyzing these and what kind of benefits we are applying to these. But as it exists, it's worked in the past, and we are able to use engineering judgment to kind of focus on some of those projects that we know historically have scored low, and kind of just beat those up ourselves. And the last scoring criteria, which this year we haven't had to use at all, is the local match that we get. So if our safety program is paying for more than 90% of a project, that is a score of 0. If we're paying for 70% or less of the project, it's a score of 5. So although it's only 5% of the points, that is sometimes more of a tiebreaker. If we're able to use less of our money on one project, then we're able to fund more projects, which is always a plus. And now we'll move on to the next polling question.
Hey, Jeremy, before we do that, got a couple questions that came in. Could I interrupt you and ask these? Okay. The first one is, they wanted to know, is funding for the safety program state or federal monies, and could it be a match for a different federal grant?
So the answer to the first one, it's a mix of both. We do primarily have federal funding to use with our safety program, but we do use a good portion of it. I would say 10 to 20% of the funding that we are using on a typical project is state funding. And with all the different funding rules and stuff, sometimes we do have to mix and match funding sources, but it's a mix of both. For the second one, we are able to match with other federal processes. We match with CMAQ funding, TAP funding, all different sorts of funding sources all the time on projects. And most of the larger projects do need a significant pool of funds to come together in order for that project to move forward.
Yeah, I remember one project in particular where a county engineer tapped funding from a little known program where if you have roads that lead onto federal land, like a base, that there's specific money available for those type of improvements. So,
right.
Next question. Does ODOT have a specific methodology for calculating the benefit cost ratio? This person is curious why active transportation scores low when the cost for those projects is typically much less.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, something that we're trying to answer internally as well. Like we've noticed historically that these have scored low, so we actually are tasking out a consultant to work with us to revise our scoring system to kind of figure out why. We think it's in part because the highway safety manual it needs to be updated, and there's been a very, very large shift in transportation culture, focusing on safety, focusing on being mode inclusive over the last decade or so. So yeah, there's not a good answer to that right now. I think it's just the methodology behind what we used beforehand didn't necessarily include that stuff, so it wasn't in our scoring criteria. But it's something we're actively working on right now.
Okay, sounds good. And you know, when we were reviewing all the poll questions ahead of time, I don't think I loaded this one. My fault.
Oh, no
So
worries.
we'll just have to ask everybody to answer it in the question box. So the questions, what do you think a typical good score on a safety application is? Oh, here we go. We got answers coming in. One person said 70. Other folks put 60, 35, 80%, 50 or higher, 75, 70, 65, 70, above 70, 50, 60, 75. Maybe you should tell us what it is.
All right. Yeah, so I heard a lot of 70s there, and that's a great score. We don't see a whole lot of those. I think we broke the record this past May with a score of 90, which is probably never going to happen again. But a typical good score for the committee, we look at that 45 to 50 range. If you're getting above there, then you have a solid project that, as long as all of the criteria was calculated correctly to get to that score, then it's most likely going to be funded. All right, I'll go ahead and move on. So we do consider other factors, as I mentioned, other than scoring. So, well, the positive BC ratio is a part of the score, but a clear match between the crash pattern and the project being presented. The scoring doesn't necessarily reflect that. Like, we do have crash metrics there, but as a committee full of engineers and planners and people that are exposed to these projects on a daily basis, we have a good grasp of what countermeasures are appropriate in what situation. So we will notice if the scoring doesn't necessarily reflect that a project will mitigate the crashes that have been happening there. The priority rankings are a huge factor. We release statewide lists basically every year that our top intersections and segments around the state are that we see these severe crashes at, and our MPOs, our TPOs, counties, or even smaller municipalities have their own safety rankings that we do use to justify these projects. And previous efforts are always taken into account. If low cost improvements have been attempted at a location and those still aren't mitigating the problem, then that's going to make us more likely to award funding for a larger project. And sometimes if a large project comes to us, we'll offer to award funding for some of these low cost countermeasures first. Things like instead of changing a signal to a roundabout, sometimes you'll just need to put up some backplates to improve visibility. Stuff like that can be very inexpensive, but bring a huge safety benefit. And matching funds, which is part of the scoring criteria. And then the strategic highway safety plans emphasis areas that were mentioned near the beginning of this presentation. That typically every project will overlap with at least one of those, because we feel that our SHSP is pretty all-encompassing of the safety goals of this program. So I'll dive into priority list for a bit. We produce a number of tools that can help district offices and local agencies prioritize their safety efforts. So on our website, if you just Google search ODOT Highway Safety Program, you can look up the HSIP, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Program priority list. And there's some other maps and those other drop downs that aren't highlighted there that can help you kind of pinpoint where there may be safety issues in your area, or pinpoint safety issues in other areas that are lookalikes of intersections or segments that you may have in your area. MPOs and RTPOs produce priority safety lists that prioritize locations for improvement potential funding as well, as I mentioned. Just like in this list, just an example is a top 40 regional high crash intersection that MORPC provided. I believe MPOs and RTPOs are required to publish these lists like we are. If they aren't required, everyone that I worked with has a list readily available to use. And our staff creates county and township maps that show high crash and severe locations as well. These can be used to prioritize local roads for analysis, improvement, and requests for funding. If you're unable to find maybe your specific township, county, village map, just reach out to us. If it's not published yet, we'll work on getting you something. Some final tips when it comes to applying for projects. Early coordination with our district staff is key. I think I said before that they are kind of the preliminary review team. If a possible project is presented to their team, they'll kind of vet it and see, kind of be that first initial glance to see if they think it'll be approved for funding eventually, because they don't want to bring something through the application process if there's no chance that it's going to get approved for funding, which doesn't happen very often, because there are a ton of countermeasures out there that we can use to make our system safer. So they'll work with our local agencies to either move forward with the project presented or make some tweaks to that project to make it more eligible for funding, so it can be better justified. A right size analysis with the location. Sometimes bigger isn't always better. Like I mentioned before, a roundabout isn't always the thing to go for at an intersection. Sometimes there's some very basic signal upgrades like backplates or supplemental signal heads are all that's needed to make an intersection safer. Visibility is a big thing. Maybe a total intersection alignment isn't needed, and we just need to trim some brush to make the sight lines longer. And another tip, just verify that there's a clear match between the crash pattern, the project, and the cost. Our scoring tools, especially the benefit cost ratio, really help those last two, the project cost and how much benefit we're getting out there. And having that safety study up front typically means that there will be a clear match between the crash pattern and the proposed countermeasure. And then when it comes presentation time, so through May or October, when these applications are being presented, it's very helpful to kind of summarize the request so the committee kind of knows what they're looking at and what data to look for. Good illustrations are always a plus. The committee can be very visual in how they review things. So just kind of a photo that overlays the existing conditions versus the proposed conditions can go a very long way. Crash diagrams are very important. That's where justification comes from, and just the funding sources in the years that we plan for this to be designed and constructed are necessary as well when it comes presentation time. And then, yeah, matching funds is always good. This year, that's changed a bit, but typically matching funds is kind of that tiebreaker thing. If there's a 10 to 30% local match, we're very likely to fund a project. We have another poll. Well, any questions from the audience right now?
Not right at well, actually there is one.
Okay.
They said the safety priority list Google Map application was a great tool, but apparently it's not working now. So they wanted to know if there's a plan to provide the same type of functionality in TIMS or other web map platforms.
Yeah, so I don't publish those tools myself, but I will follow up on that. Because yeah, I've used like the Google Earth version of it as well, and it was very helpful. Anything else?
Not right now. And I think we've got
Alright.
a poll coming up next, right?
We do. Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Okay, so the poll states that the review committee considers safety studies / analysis, project scoring, and engineering judgment as primary factors for funding. Is this true or false? I'm impressed. After 40 minutes, they are still voting quickly. So, and for those of you who are hesitant to vote, we are not recording how you voted, so don't worry about that. Just go ahead and get your vote in. All right. Okay, I'm going to close that poll down and I'll share the results. We have 94% that chose true and 6% that chose false. So I'll hide those results.
All
All
right.
yours again.
Thank you. Good work, everybody. That is true. Those are the primary factors, which kind of have a bunch of sub-factors under them as well. So I presented all this information about how to get project funding and all that, but there's always the caveat that a safety study has to be performed beforehand to get significant project funding. So I manage the local safety assistance program through the Highway Safety Program. And one of the main goals of this is to kind of build a bridge over that gap and provide funding and technical assistance for some of these preliminary measures like a safety study or a local road safety plan or a safety audit or a systemic analysis of a city or town. So this program is in place to assist all of our local agencies by providing that funding and technical assistance for these planning level analyses and safety studies. So I'll just go through a fairly quick program overview, some of our accomplishments up to this date, and some of our priorities moving forward. So our program overview, the goal of the local safety assistance program is to reduce the occurrence of severe crashes on Ohio's locally maintained roadway system by overcoming possible local limitations to identify, understand, or address them, or fund figuring out these issues. The program falls in line with ODOT's Towards Zero Deaths initiatives, and as well as various cities' Vision Zero initiatives. I know Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati all have pledged to begin or have already begun their Vision Zero initiatives. Once again, this Towards Zero Death and Vision Zero initiatives, it would be great to eliminate all crashes, but eliminating severe crashes is the end goal. And we're able to better prioritize our resources by having that goal in mind versus the eliminating all crashes goal. So one of the main reasons why we started the local safety assistance program is this graphic right here. This comes straight out of our strategic highway safety plan. And as you can see, our locally maintained roadways see a larger share of crashes in line with our emphasis areas on all but one, which is our commercial motor vehicles, which makes sense if more crashes are happening on the interstate for them. So it's important that we're not only providing funding for projects, but also providing the technical assistance necessary to overcome the varied levels of resources, expertise, and financial ability within local agencies across the state, because not one is not necessarily like the other. So we have a variety of assistance available to kind of tackle this issue at hand. So this resulted in us opening up free technical assistance, as I said before, where we can perform county and regional safety plans, develop systemic safety projects, and perform safety studies and road safety audits. Our regional and county safety plans help us document regional/county safety issues and identify potential projects that may be eligible for safety program funding. A lot of the times we will have to go from a plan to a safety study in order to get some of the more engineering level estimates and engineering level countermeasures, feasibility study type of stuff before applying for a larger project. But we do get a lot of abbreviated applications that come out of our regional and county safety plans for some of the lower cost treatments like signage or signal upgrades, that kind of stuff. Our systemic safety improvements, the pedestrian safety improvement program is our largest example of this, which will be covered in the fourth section of this webinar next week. We develop systemic safety projects and assist with project implementation for those. sometimes those can even be pushed through the abbreviated application process if they are lower cost in nature, like signs, like detection upgrades, that kind of stuff. And road safety audits and safety studies, as you're well aware, these need to be completed before applying for larger projects. And on the right there is a link to our request for local safety study assistance. That's only open twice a year, so unfortunately right now that link is closed, but our district safety staff is always available to field requests for safety studies, and we do have a pool of funds set aside for requests that come throughout the year outside of these windows when we do have to prioritize studies. So this is just kind of what the form looks like. It's pretty basic, just contact info. We ask for a brief problem statement and just some crash data. And if you go to fill out this form when the window's open, and if you need assistance, I'm always available, or our district safety review team will be available to help you out. Major items needed are the crash data and problem statement, and then we just would like to see a map of the location so we can kind of go and initially review it ourselves and start scoping a study before we send it to a consultant. It's kind of the process that I've laid out over the last couple of slides. So we'll receive a request. It'll be evaluated by both me and our district staff. And if it's approved, we'll hold a scoping call and meeting with the local agency stakeholders, the district staff, me, and the consultant that we assign to the job. Once the scope is authorized, then we'll move on to complete the study. And typically the very last task a consultant has is to fill out the application and present during one of our open windows. Our accomplishments over the last few years, we've completed 9 regional and county safety plans, which are highlighted in blue. Systemic safety improvements highlighted in green. We just finished the District 8 Systemic Pedestrian Safety Project in the southwest. We just finished an expansion of that, so we expanded out to the whole MVRPC region. So we added Miami and Montgomery County to that, and that was finalized yesterday. So I didn't get a chance to update our map here for that. And we've completed 30 road safety audits and safety studies over the last 2.5 years as well. And 78% of these projects have ended up as safety applications and were granted funding for the projects. So we have a pretty good track record, and we're trying to bump that number up even more. Our regional and county safety plans significantly increased our coordination with our local and regional partners, and we have several safety studies initiated that came from these plans. And we're working to kind of close the plan to project loop, so we don't always want to have to require further studying that come out of these plans. And as our plans become more thorough and we kind of figure out what we want to see in these plans, we're able to justify safety funding within these plans. And we also want to just address implementation and sustainability within these plans. We want our projects to last and be safe for a long period of time. Our systemic safety improvements, I mentioned before, we completed a district-wide screening in District 8 and bumped that up to the whole MVRPC region as well. Our observed benefits, we've seen benefits just from the initial screening that came from our Vision Zero plans out of our 3 largest cities in the state. Our pedestrian safety improvement program, which is putting in pedestrian safety countermeasures at 455 locations across the state. It was $10 million of the construction funding. That is under design right now, and we're going to see our first set of plans in 2 weeks from that. And just other areas of improvement. These statewide screens that we're trying to implement are just similar to what we did in District 8. That's a future goal that our program has, and So we're able to kind of pick out hotspots based off various risk factors. In our road safety studies and safety audits, and I switched up the numbers, I apologize. It's 87%, not 78% of our complete studies eventually have ended up and awarded project funding, which has been around $3 million. And we have various improvement areas there. We're trying to streamline the process, which is why we have that form available. And we think we have a pretty good process in place that we're starting slow this summer, and hopefully will expand over the next couple of years. And one of the reasons why we're hosting webinars like these is we want to work on our program awareness and just make sure that every community that wants to be involved can be involved and will be involved. So our priorities moving forward. We want to continue to provide technical assistance and continue to work with local governments and our MPOs and RTPOs to better understand and address safety issues. We just want to bolster our website presence, whether it's on an ODOT website or just online in general. Work with communications to set up some toolboxes for various resources and get that request application out there for local communities to use. And we want to publish more tools to use. Right now we're working on it's currently called the SPAM tool, name is subject to change, but if you've ever used our CAM tool or crash analysis module before, it's going to be similar to that, but it's going to be planning level, and you'll input 10 years of crash data, and and you'll also input the area's VMT, vehicular miles traveled, and the area's population, and it'll spit out a bunch of charts and graphs that we typically use in our local safety plans that should show 10-year trends and level of exposure. So a more planning level analysis, and along with that, there's going to be a Word template that you'll just be able to copy and paste these graphs into, and it'll kind of auto-generate a safety plan. So while we have been funding and working with consultants to create safety plans for some counties and regions, we want to be able to provide resources so a community can create their own safety plan with not a ton of effort or not a ton of experience beforehand of doing so. We're working on that right now, and I think by the end of this year, those templates and tools will be completed. So we'll be able to distribute those so people can create their own safety plans for their respective regions. So we've been burning through funding over the last couple of years. So we've gotten through most of what we had, but right now we do still have safety study funding available. So I definitely encourage if you know of a spot that seems dangerous in your local community, please reach out to me or reach out to your district to try to get on this funding. We, like I said before, our request through that window through that one form is closed right now, but we'll still field requests because we do have the funding available to perform safety studies. And that's all I got today. I'm happy to answer any questions that we may have here at the end, and my contact info is on the screen. If you ever want to reach out, please don't hesitate.
Well, if we don't have any questions, how about we take a look at that website of yours, Jeremy?
Let's do it. Okay.
If you can't get a hold of Jeremy, you know, one thing is this website's open 24/7, 365, right?
It sure is.
It says some very good information on here.
Yeah. So if you just go and search the Highway Safety Improvement Program, Ohio, and click on the first link, it kind of brings you to our main page for our safety improvement program. And over on the right, just a bunch of separate pages. I mentioned some of our tools that we have. So we have existing tools. Our GCAT, you're able to pull crash data from our TIMS, which our Traffic Information Management System, and throw that into there. So it becomes organized, and then that tool can be input into our CAM tool, which will spit out a bunch of charts and graphs about that crash data. Separate from tools, or the funding application process is again laid out here, and under the funding application process page, that list of all of the district contacts to go through for project funding can be found.
Here, let's go back to go back a page. Yeah, so you talked about the GCAT program. I want to let everybody know that our LTAP office, we provide training around 4 times a year on how to use the GCAT program so that you can actually take a look at the crash data within your locality, and so
Ray,
you'll know. Yes,
I'm going to chime in real
yes.
quick. I actually
Okay.
uploaded a flyer for the GCAT webinar, which happens to be this afternoon, into the handout section of the GoToWebinar pod if anyone's interested in registering for that.
Yeah, I
You'll see
mentioned
it.
that to Jeremy the other day. I go, I can't believe we have GCAT training the same day as our first webinar.
Yep.
But
And there was a quick question that came in for you guys on the question box. Someone would like to know, is the current highway safety plan for Ohio on the website?
The SHSP, I'm assuming it is. So if you're on this main Highway Safety Improvement Program page on the right, the Strategic Highway Safety Plan is located here. And if you just click on the graphic, you can find it all. So yep, the previous 5 years and 2020s will be out. I think it's due November 8th of this year. So it's a lot of good information of trends that we've seen in Ohio, up through, I guess, the 2014, because that's when it was published. But it's most of these trends have continued over the last 5 years, so it's still very useful.
back to what I was saying, I was going to let everybody know that they really need to take the GCAT training in order to be a user of the software. So I don't think just anybody can. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think just anybody can use the GCAT. They have to actually take our training, and then that way they'll be listed as a user, and then they can use it. Am I right on that?
That sounds right. And out, just beyond that, it's a good training put on by my coworker Caroline Griffith, who has the most bubbly personality in ODOT probably. So highly recommend.
Yeah, so you could actually take the training today, or you can just be in touch with my office, and we'll make sure that you're signed up for our emails, and you'll know when the next GCAT training will be held. And it's free. So what else do we have on here, Jeremy? What do you have there under crash trends?
Oh yeah, so just kind of over the last 10, 15 years, some crash trends that we have seen. I wouldn't, so once again, this plan is being updated at the end of the year. So we'll see some of these numbers change, because actually over the last 5 years, we've seen increases in fatalities, but decreases in serious injuries, which is another thing that we're looking into. Why would one rise and the other fall? Yeah, the most important trends can be found in the document itself. Some other things that we have available. There is the priority list, as mentioned before. Can find down here just the top 500 locations from the last decade. We will not be publishing a new list this year. We're kind of along with our scoring process for applications, we're kind of reviewing how we rank locations as well. So we'll be publishing a list next summer. That'll be our next one.
I know that you mentioned the program Towards Zero Deaths in your presentation. I know that one of the things we like to remind locals is that there's actually significantly more lane miles of roadway on the local level than on the state level, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so, that's one of the reasons we're reaching out is because, we need help from the locals. We need to for them to participate in order to achieve our lofty goal of towards zero deaths. So how can we get down to zero if we don't include the improvements to the local roadways, since there's more lane miles at the local level? When you add up all the county roads and city streets and township roads and things like that. So we don't want the reason for your locality to not get a safety improvement program is because you just didn't know how to get the process rolling or who to reach out to. So now you know that you have ways to figure out where your crashes are happening and who to reach out to. Your either Jeremy or your ODOT district office, and you have some contacts there to start the conversation. That's really how things all evolve to get into the things that Jeremy spoke about today.
We've got some more questions that have come into the question box.
Yeah.
One person would like to know, what is the average number of fatal crashes that occur in Ohio per year, and is the trend going down?
So our fatal crashes are actually going up right now. And that's based off, usually we use like a rolling 3 to 5 year average. And we're usually in between 1,000 and 1,100. But we've been over the 1,000 mark for a number of years running now.
And I want
Okay.
to clarify that even though it's going up currently in the last 3 to 5, you said, Jeremy,
Yes.
it's really been going down steadily over time. Like if you go back to like 1969, I think you
Right.
would find that there was about 2,750 fatalities that year on Ohio's roads. So we went from that number down to our lowest ever was like 991 in 2013, I believe.
Yeah,
And then we're somewhere
that's
around
about right.
1,100. So
Yeah,
if you
and
think I was going to
sorry.
say, just think about in 1969. If anybody can remember that, we've the roads are not just the roads are a lot safer, but if you want to talk about the 4 E's of roadway safety, we feel have worked together to lower these numbers. So that's a good quiz question. What's the 4 E's of roadway safety? One is education. So there's several programs and initiatives that we consider roadway safety education. You see billboards and things like things that say stop the texts, stop the wrecks, right? Letting people know that it's against the law to text and drive. Or what's another one? Drive sober or get pulled over. These are all campaigns. And other outreach like talking to teen drivers at high schools or county fairs, state fairs, trying to reach out to educate drivers about roadway safety. Another E is emergency medical services. If you think back to the 60s, I don't think they had life flight helicopters and specialized trauma rooms at hospitals and things like that. So there's a lot of lives have been saved through emergency medical services. So hats off to them, right? Another one is enforcement. So, state highway patrol, local police, deputy county sheriffs, all done a lot to lower crashes through enforcement, not just speeding tickets, but think about the difference between being caught driving while intoxicated from 1969 to now? You know, what is the difference between the punishments? Probably one was probably a slap on the wrist back in those days, and now it's you know, a very high price to pay, and uh, at least some weekend jail time maybe, and some education to go through while you're there. So big differences. So that's helped to lower the number of crashes through drunk driving, and also through drugged driving. They've got a lot of things where they can, a lot of useful tools to figure out what kind of drugs people are on, and making sure that to get them the help they need. And then the final E is engineering. And so think of the engineering improvements to roadways over the years, making curves safer, and um, you know, just the engineering standards in general, and new roadway construction with safety in mind. And then of course we have the safer vehicles today and things like that. So all these things work together to lower the number of our fatal crashes. But we need to do more. You know, we've been down at this 1,100 fatalities a year for some time, and so that's why we need to do more, step it up, even for you know, and at the local level as well. So that's another reason why we're reaching out
Mhm.
to you guys through this.
Absolutely right. Somebody just put in the chat pod that don't forget automotive engineering, the safety glass and the airbags. But someone right before that wanted to know, and I think this is more for Jeremy on the scoring aspect. Do you consider human behavior in your scoring?
So that's really tough to score and kind of put a number to make it quantitative. So that would probably be more in the engineering judgment portion of our criteria that we base applications off of. When presenting, we do often get presented with behaviors of the drivers or the users of that system. So and it is helpful for us to make decisions on what countermeasures may be appropriate. So we do take it into account, although it's not necessarily part of scoring.
Okay. And then there was a follow-up question to the one concerning matching federal funds. They'd like to know if they can get clarification on using safety funds to match other federal funds. They were of the understanding that federal funds cannot be used to match other federal funds. So if safety funds are used to match, do you use state funds instead of federal?
That I might have to dig into that one a little more. It was my understanding that we could match with other programs. So sometimes it doesn't always work out because there's different scheduling criteria and stuff. But I believe there are some federal programs that we can't match federal safety funds with. It might be a more program-based thing than a overall federal to federal funding based thing.
And then another question, is something like connected vehicle technology as a part of ITS a viable countermeasure for safety studies?
So as of right now, no. We just haven't seen the fleet of vehicles out on our roads where that would make a significant impact. But that technology is being talked about and discussed all the time. I was just on the Pedestrian Safety Summit that was hosted by Federal Highways last week, and one of the main talking points there was how um, the the Highway Safety Insurance Institute or Insurance Institute of Highway Safety is working with auto manufacturers to develop good technologies to detect pedestrians inside the car. So that's like that's one facet of the connected vehicle ITS world that there is safety funding involved in that at some level. Just coming up with new technologies, but within our program, we are not yet funding that sort of stuff.
Okay. And we did have a comment from someone who actually used to be an ODOTer in the question box regarding that federal funding. It says typically federal funds can be combined, but not used as an actual match to other federal funds. So thank you
Okay.
for
Yeah,
putting that in there.
maybe. Yeah, thanks, Julie. I may have just been confused at the question then. But yeah, that is true. The match portion, or the percentage match, will only be calculated based off non-federal funds.
Another question that came in is regarding the abbreviated safety application process. They wanted to know, they said they'd heard that there was limitations that they could only ask for like one type of improvement or engineering type improvement. Are they limited in the, like disciplines as far as what they can ask for in those projects, or can they ask for multiple types of improvements on those applications?
Oh yeah, for sure. There can be multiple types of improvements. We've funded some smaller systemic improvements through this. So yeah, don't hold yourself back. And I mean, it's that funding threshold of $500,000 is really the only criteria, as long as it's an improvement that can be justified from a safety perspective.
And then there was another person that wanted to know if you could go back to, or maybe go to the priority lists on your website and explain the different types of maps that are being offered there.
Yeah.
They said it gets confusing to know what's what.
That's just our spreadsheets. Sorry, it might take me a minute. I don't have to use these all that often. Are there any other questions while I'm finding this?
Yep, there's other questions. One person put in there that they believe that OPWC can be used as a local match, but other federal funds can't be considered for the actual local match. And then one person wanted to know, would ODOT be willing to designate only state safety funding for the match to a federal grant?
Can you repeat that one? Sorry.
They said they wanted to know, would ODOT be willing to just designate state funding if they were going to fund a project that someone wanted to match other federal, use the ODOT funding as a match for other federal grants?
Yeah, and we can, and I don't just we typically don't we'll do all the funding juggling after we approve projects. We kind of figure that out on the back end, like with the state and federal and the toll revenue credit that we're able to use. We can definitely add our resources appropriately one after we approve projects. That's never been an issue for us. And I'm assuming that this is the page that was asked about before, the maps and the list. So it was just the maps can get confusing, right, Victoria?
That is the page that they were asking about.
Yes.
So they wanted to better understand what's offered there.
So yeah, I know it's kind of tough because it's all on a single PDF page, and the actual rankings are kind of hard to see. I think thankfully they're pretty well made. So if you zoom in and see it, you can see the rankings pretty well. I just pulled up Franklin County because I'm familiar with Franklin County. But any segment or location that is boxed or has one of these colors is considered a ranked location on our SIP maps or safety improvement project maps. So that's just an extra justification to a project. And I've spoken to a couple other people over the last few weeks that while it is important that or is a good justification tool that a location does lie on these maps. Like these maps aren't all inclusive, and some of our metrics may not encompass certain areas that should probably be on these maps. So just take it with a slight grain of salt if a location's not on the map. But and if there are very specific questions, feel free to reach out to me after this too. I can walk through a map or a list.
Okay, they said thank you.
Yeah.
Someone else wanted to know more about the resources offered for bicycle and pedestrian. They said they saw that on an earlier section of the website. And they also wanted to know if there would be the ability to provide comment on what the consultants are going to work on as far as, you know, ranking or how active transportation projects might rank better within the program.
Yeah, to that last point, we're always looking for innovative ideas and stuff, and if you have them, we're all about hearing that. As we're just starting scoping that process now, so get your ideas in if you have them. And active transportation funding wise, I mean we've always funded active transportation in some capacity. The program's really blowing up now as we focus on all modes of transportation even more. So yeah, this page just has a lot of good info. We've been doing a ton of work, more planning level work and analysis to kind of just come up with some pedestrian and bicycle safety memos. And there's Safe Routes to School, which is a great source of funding for multimodal facilities around schools. Our pedestrian safety improvement program, while this round was targeted, we approached the cities versus making it an application process. In the future may turn into more of an application process so we can hit more jurisdictions. Yeah, this page is a great tool. There's just a ton of links here. Our state and US bike route system is relatively new. We're working on getting that all the resolutions in and that signed, and that'll be a great tool to justify funds for. This is a state and national bike route system that we want to be safe for cyclists. So that'll be just another tool in the toolbox to use for project justification. Yeah.
Awesome. Somebody would like to know, what is the percent of HSIP funding that's spent on the local system versus the state system?
That is another good question. Historically, I think it was definitely leaning the wrong way. It was more than half on the state system, less than half on the local system. And at least on the specific projects and task orders that I've gotten to be involved in, we're seeing that more as a 60-40 split, with the 60% being towards the local system and 40% towards the state system, which still isn't necessarily to that total lane miles ratio, but we're getting closer and closer to that. And I don't know if we'll hit that just because of some of the funding that we're forced to use on the interstate system, but we're getting closer and closer to that year by year.
That's great. I have to, in Dave Brand's memory, repeat his comment to us that he made many years ago about if 84% of the center lane miles are local miles, then why isn't 84% of the funding spent on them? But we do understand that the state system does have much different standards, and you know, the way that the roads are built does cost more than on the local system, just because of the volume that's on the state system and the higher speeds. So I know that you guys have been making a tremendous effort to get more money out on the local system, and it's been phenomenal. We have a person who asked about handouts, and I will put this to the two presenters to see if you guys can commit to getting those handouts to us far enough in advance that we could email them out to everybody next week. So
Oh yeah,
to put
for
you
sure.
both on the spot, but okay. That would be great. So because some people would like to have them ahead of time to print them out. So if we get them out, hopefully a day ahead. That'll give everybody a chance to print out and have them available so you can take notes on them. So, all right. Well, I think that we've given them a ton of information this morning. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Jeremy or Ray, that you wanted to add?
Just thanks for being here, and we hope you participate in all 4 parts of this series. The next one's going to be Monday morning, then we got Wednesday and Friday. Am I right on that? No, I'm wrong on that, aren't I?
Monday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I knew it wasn't right as soon as I said it.
Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and please watch as your reminders show up. Recently, we've had some issues with GoToWebinar sending our reminders out in Greenwich Mean Time, which that is the time zone for England and the time zone that they base all other time zones in the world around. We don't know why GoToWebinar is doing that. I've got a trouble ticking in with them, but know that we are not scheduling things on Greenwich Mean Time. It's Eastern Daylight Time, and I'm pretty sure if you click the link to add the calendar invitation to your calendar, it will hopefully put it on there in the right time zone. So, and you guys are getting lots of kudos. People said excellent webinar. Thank you for such great information, and they really appreciate it, and they're looking forward to the coming sessions. So, all right, well,
Great.
thank you both. We're going to wrap up just a few minutes early. So we look forward to having you on next week's webinars, and we appreciate your time. Please stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you on the GCAT webinar this afternoon. Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.